Hello and welcome to this week's myNewsWrap, news from the world of SAP, Microsoft, and the world in between. Today we will have a bit of a shorter session because there weren't too many news this week, but quite some highlights, I have to say. So let's get started with, a very, let's say, regular guest on this podcast, namely a new blog post by Tobias Hoffmann was published, summarizing his point of view around Sapphire 2021. Finally, again, lyrics at the start of the blog post. I missed them on the last ones, but that's just a side note. Tobias summarizes his experience and his points around Sapphire, around the main topics of Sapphire, like the business network, or like the Signavio topic, his point of view around the keynote. I think a lot of fair points that he addresses there, a lot of points that SAP has to look at in the future. And well, as usual, quite good content. If you attended Sapphire, or if you want to read some point of view, some more critical point of view, I highly recommend that blog post. And with that, I switch to the more technical area of SAP, namely to the area of the cloud application programming model, where there was one blog post that I would like to highlight around dealing with queues from the SAP event mesh. It's not a super long blog post, but it is really cool from the perspective of the content-wise, what you have to keep in mind if you use the cloud application programming model in conjunction with the SAP event mesh, what to expect and what not to expect. For example, if you have a queue without a topic, you will not be able to consume it out of the box. You have to do some additional configuration around that in order to be able to consume those messages. So really super cool, high quality content from my perspective. Then let's switch to the Microsoft part of the house, because there was no more news this week from the SAP side. So yeah, let's go to Microsoft. And there are some quite cool news. One thing is about the durable functions extension for JavaScript. There are two enhancements. One is valid for JavaScript and TypeScript, which is cool from my perspective. It's simplifying the unit testing experience with respect to the mock of the durable functions API that you have to use within your functions. And the second one, that's really, from my perspective, the highlight, is an improved TypeScript type system around entities. If you compare the handling of entities in the .NET area with the non-.NET area, let's put it that way, for example, with TypeScript area, you will see that it's much more clumsy. And now with this new version of the NPM package, you really get a better typing around that one. And there is also always an example within the repository. So that's really cool. Then one YouTube video around the topic of OpenAPI and where you can use it within the Microsoft Azure ecosystem in the broadest sense. So within Azure Functions, within Logic Apps, within the Power Platform, and how you can make use of that then in conjunction with the Azure API management. What's possible, what's not possible. So really a well spent, I think, 1 hour of information around that topic. Then one blog post again from the serverless part, which brings together a lot of cool features that came out over the last weeks or even month. And this blog post describes how to build a serverless real-time chat application making use of Web PubSub, Azure Static Web Apps, and of course for the API for the Glue Azure Functions. So if you take a look at the blog post, there is one overview picture of the components. So that's really cool. So you really have the static web apps, you have the auth API, you have functions in the background, and you have the web socket service, namely the Azure Web Pub Sub service. So that really brings together all this new cool features and show how to make use of them. So that's a really great blog post. Then I stumbled across one resource that I didn't know was there. There is a GitHub repo by Microsoft that's called Monthly Resources. So they publish there each month now since I think 3 months resources for developers. And the recent edition is all around Microsoft Build, what to get out of Build from the developer perspective. So that's really, really cool if you want to get a quick overview around what happened in the developer ecosystem and what Microsoft thinks is important, which is, from my perspective, also an interesting statement because you see where Microsoft is heading, which topics are really important for them. Yeah, with that, I switched to GitHub. GitHub brought out a lot of news this week. They kind of opened the gates with news. First of all, 2 general availability announcements. One about GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions now officially support environments, environment protection rules, environment secrets. So they are now GA. So you can now really model your different stages, like development, testing, production, have their different protection rules. So who can deploy, and of course different secrets if you want to deploy something there. So that's really cool. That's now general available, so you can really model things within GitHub Actions. So yeah, if you're starting new projects, if you're using GitHub, I think there will be more and more traction getting up at GitHub, looking at such GA announcements. Yeah, making it more likely to use to GitHub Actions instead of Azure DevOps, from my perspective. So if you're starting a new project, I think I would start with GitHub Actions. Now, another GA announcement that's kind of a small but important feature. You now get a confirmation pop-up when you request a review, especially that's important for large teams where you have a team with more than 100 members. It might be quite annoying if you request a confirmation and by accident you request it from the whole team. So that's now kind of secured or prevented by this request confirmation. Then maybe you might have seen it, maybe not yet. The referencing of, let's say, GitHub artifacts like repositories changed a bit. So when you referenced, for example, within LinkedIn or within Twitter, a GitHub repo, what you saw is a link to the GitHub repo in the card and the face of the author or the face of the owner of the GitHub repo. That was kind of not the best experience from my perspective. Now, there was an update to that one, and they now built up the images on the fly for you, making use of a lot of information that comes out of the repository. And that's valid for the repository per se, that's valid for issues, that's valid for pull requests, and so on. And this blog post that I referenced within the show notes gives you an idea what happens behind the scenes. So what framework GitHub built up in order to build this little cards experience. So very interesting and very cool feature from my perspective. And then there was another announcement. So GitHub was really busy this week around a new GitHub issue experience, which will come later this year. So it's announced for fall. Question is which fall, but I guess the one in US and Europe. around the experience, there's a little video attached to the tweet, which shows you how you can now interact with GitHub issues, in a sense, how to make use of them, do the project planning, to the tracking, and so on and so forth. You can already sign up for beta in order to make use of that. The official availability or the general availability, as I said, will be later this year. So yeah, GitHub was definitely quite busy. Then let's switch to Kubernetes. There are two things that I would like to highlight, two little kubectl or kubectl, or however you want to call it, plugins. One is called Outdated, and well, the name already says it. It shows you out-of-date images running in your cluster. So it will scan all the namespaces that you have read access to, and will then tell you which images that you're using within those namespaces might be out of date. Quite useful. It does not anyway interact with your cluster in a changing mode. It just reads out the information, gives you the information, and then you can react accordingly. The second one is also a plugin for kubectl called kubectl Whisper Secret plugin. And that addresses one very specific topic when you deal with kubectl and you create secrets within your Kubernetes cluster. You usually can do that within, let's say, one line of entry, where you also specify really the secret itself, so the secret data. And if you're using a terminal, and anybody can, if he has access to your terminal, then via terminal history, check out the secret. And this plugin kind of makes that more secure, taking the input from the console in an interactive manner. So it's then no longer accessible via the history. So that's really quite useful from my perspective. Then let's switch to the area of learning and events. And of course, I have to highlight one event that happened yesterday on Thursday evening in Germany. And that was the introduction of Windows 11. Within the show notes, I've referenced the blog post that summarizes the information around Windows 11 and also references the video. I think there's also the event somewhere referenced that you can look. It was, I think, around 1 hour or 40 minutes. Yeah, it was quite interesting from my perspective. I really would like to get my hands on and get this new experience that they have, because there are quite a lot of things that really have changed from the way how you interact with Windows, how you interact with the apps. There was also one really cool announcement. You can now run Android apps on your Windows system. Android apps that are available via the Amazon store, if I'm not mistaken. So that's really, really interesting. Also, the Microsoft Store was kind of refurnished, so to say. So quite some interesting news. Some news were, kind of okayish from my perspective. So they were there. They didn't really resonate with me, but that's kind of a personal thingy, I think. So if you're a Windows user, I think you should take a look at that one and build your opinion on that. As I said, I'm really curious to get my hands on Windows 11. Then one thing around, let's say, learning Apache Kafka that crossed my path. It's a really cool, interactive or animated comic that you can scroll through that uses otters. Otters. In order to highlight how Apache Kafka works. It's really made with a lot of love from my perspective. So if you want to get a first glance at Apache Kafka and how it works, that's definitely something to look at, because it's really nicely made. It's well explaining things. A a completely different approach than a lot of other things that I saw in that area. So really cool stuff. Then to events that come up that I would like to highlight. One is an event around static web apps. Of course, as I said already several times, the new hot shit that's out there. Definitely something to watch. On June the 30th, so not too far away, all around static web apps. It's just half a day, giving you, I think, a quite rough overview around Azure static web apps, around the static web app CLI, how to do DevOps, and so on and so forth. So if you didn't start yet with static web apps, or if you want to have some insights, I think that's the right place to go. Then another event or another format that is brought out by Golo Roden. I already mentioned a lot of his formats that he's pushing out via his YouTube channel. And there is one new thing that he announced this week that's called Tech Lunch Summer Edition. That will focus on the topics of architecture, code quality, containerization, CQRS, and DDD. So quite a broad spectrum of topics, but I think really super interesting topics. So it will start at end of July. I think it's written there somewhere. 21st of July, yeah. This format will start, and yeah, all the stuff that I have seen from Golo Roden up to now is really super high quality content. It's in German, I have to stress, so it's not available in English. But if you have touch points with any of these topics, I'm quite sure this is something that you should follow up. It's a series, so that there will be more sessions, more webinars around the topic. So yeah, definitely something to take a look at. And with that, I'm already at my last topic for this week, something more exotic around the area of developer productivity, namely an VS Code extension around the writing style guide of Microsoft. So if you're writing for Microsoft, or if you want to improve documentation for Microsoft that you easily can do via GitHub, or if you are even a contributor and doing a blog post at any area of Microsoft, like tech blog posts, you have to follow a writing style guide. And that writing style guide is kind of available as a PDF, as a website, that you have to have open side by side and check your writing. Now, this extension that is quite fresh out there, so it's really new. It's 009 from the release version. Its last commit was 16 hours ago. As of recording this video, this writing style guide helps you with inline support within VS Code. If you write something for Microsoft, it highlights, for example, terms that you should not use, like shown within the marketplace. For example, don't use exit to describe the closing an app or a program. That will be highlighted within your text. So that's really cool. There are some stuff that is already supported. There is some stuff that is not yet supported from the front style guide. But that's, I think, a really useful addition. And well, of course, exotic. If you do not do something with Microsoft documentation, you don't need it. But if you do, I think that's really super useful. And with that, I'm already at the end of today's session. Short but crisp. I think a lot of interesting stuff, especially from the Microsoft world. Now, one announcement for next week. Due to private reasons, I will not be able to record these sessions to be able to publish it on Friday. So it will come out, I think, latest at Sunday. Let's put it that way. But it will come out, and there will be some changes announced due to some changes that will happen to me next week. So yeah, looking forward to you. And with that, I wish you a nice Friday, a nice weekend, and see you next Sunday probably. Until then, goodbye.